Thank you very much, and it's an absolute honor to be here speaking today. So very briefly, amyloidosis is a group of rare diseases where a protein misfolds and deposits on organs, causing organ damage and ultimately death. There are about 15 different types of amyloidosis. There are no approved treatments for any type. The most common type is called AL amyloidosis, and about 3,500 patients are affected every year in the US. 74% of those will have cardiac heart involvement. 40% of patients will be so sick by the time they're diagnosed that they will die within 6 months of being diagnosed. One of the really important things to realize that with rare diseases, it's not just funding that's scarce, it's also the knowledge about the disease and the number of patients that we have available to take part in clinical trials. So I just want to talk a little bit and give an example about what this looks like in clinical development. There is a trial, and you don't need to worry about the details of it. It was called the Consensus Trial, and it was for heart failure. A very successful trial, a model that many of us are being asked to reproduce and consider. The Consensus Trial involved 253 patients. When you look at the heart failure population and the number of patients that were enrollable in this trial, that works out at 1,600 patients. For each 1,600, you only need one patient to enroll. So 0.006% of the population with heart failure would be needed to enroll in that trial. It was a very successful trial. It enrolled and actually completed early, within 8 months. So looking at that for our populations, what does it mean? In AL amyloidosis, we have 1,500 patients would be able to enroll in a cardiac heart failure study. What that means is 1 in 6 patients would need to enroll in that study, or 17%. We actually first completed our first prospective trial with AL amyloidosis, 110 patients, and it took 4 years and 10 months to enroll. It doesn't add up. What we see with cancer studies is only 3% of the population will enroll in a clinical trial. So this is the reason we really need to find innovative ways to run clinical trials. So I'm going to run through some of the things that are innovative that we need to look at. One of the really important things is to understand the patient focus in clinical trials. We need to do the trials that are meaningful to patients. We need to understand what are the endpoints that are serving the patient community so that those are the treatments we develop. And we need to develop and generate the evidence needed to support the value and reimbursements of these treatments. And I know you're going to hear more about this later. Another area that is really important is biomarkers. And this is a topic that could take a good hour to explain. So I'm going to give you a very cartoon representation of this, but a biomarker is a marker that will help tell us what is going on with a patient. And what you see is if you can identify a biomarker that is related to the disease, and when we study it in a clinical trial, we see that that biomarker changes. And if that biomarker could be used as a surrogate endpoint for a clinical trial, so we're no longer looking at survival as the endpoint, but we can use a biomarker as a surrogate endpoint that will be highly likely to indicate survival. Let's look at what that would look like again in a clinical trial. So here is a clinical trial that we recently did, and it took 4 years to enroll, and there were 180 patients in it. This trial has taken 6 years to get the full results readout. It's just unacceptable and undoable or repeatable in populations. Now, if we did this trial using a surrogate endpoint, and as it happens, we have one in our community that we really believe is a valuable endpoint, look at the difference that that provides. You need fewer patients to take part in a trial. The timeline is hugely shortened, and we get results in 2.5 years. Other areas, and I'm just going to go through these because I know that we are short on time today, but really important things to think innovatively about and work in partnership on. Natural history studies are vitally important. We need to understand what the path to progression looks like in diseases, to understand how we can use those, the knowledge we gain from natural history studies, and we need to push to use those as comparators in trials to move away from placebos. We need to also look at basket trials is something that's being talked about in umbrella trials a lot. And the idea that you can have a master protocol where a number of different products could be used in comparison with one placebo arm. And likewise, using different subpopulations with one therapy to measure those with one therapy will make a huge difference. The other area that we need to be innovative about is using real-world data. We are in this incredible age of data. It is changing the way all of us live and function. We need to find ways to bring those into clinical trials because so much is actually about patients' real-life, everyday experience, so bringing those in. The other area is adaptive trial design. The way clinical trials are typically set up, the trial is set and we wait till we read out. By having certain points along a trial where we review and analyze the data and can shift direction if needed, stop trials that aren't working, really can change the landscape in how we develop treatments and really gives hope to rare disease trials running effectively and efficiently. So I would just ask, I think we heard from Representative Lance, how important 21st century cures is. And I really think that legislation, and we know, was so strongly supported by the rare disease community. And it's really important to ensure that many of the beneficial provisions are implemented promptly and as intended. There are many external factors that can affect the progress of these initiatives, including policies related to hiring freezes and uncertain levels of funding. So it's something we need to keep monitoring, measuring, and advocating for. Thank you very much.